You guys hear me okay?
Indeed.
Ken, this is Jennifer. I think you can give Scott the green light when you're ready to start the recording, and then he will kick this off before handing it over to Stephanie.
Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to tonight's Town Talk. I'm City Manager Scott Neal. This year we planned a series of town talks around important topics included in the City of Edina's 2020-2021 budget work plan. The city has 4 primary budget goals: strong foundation, reliable service, livable city, and better together. Tonight's presentation is about affordable housing. Affordable Housing Development Manager Stephanie Hawkinson will talk about the importance of affordable housing, what the city is doing to create and preserve affordable housing, and what we're doing to protect tenants. Stephanie will speak for about 30 minutes. After her presentation, she will take questions. If you have called in or are watching from home, please send an email with your question to Communications Director Jennifer Benarott at her email address, which is jbenarott@edinamn.gov. JBENNEROTTE at edinamn.gov. Jennifer and Senior Communications Coordinator Kaylin Eidsness will read the questions to Stephanie to answer. We will end tonight's Town Talk when there are no more questions, or at 8 o'clock, 8 p.m., whichever is first. However, you can continue to ask questions and make comments online at bettertogetheredina.com for the next week. The online conversation closes on Wednesday, July 22nd. Now I would like to formally introduce Stephanie. Stephanie Hawkinson has served as the Affordable Housing Development Manager for the City of Edina for the past 2 years. She brings knowledge of both the developer and the public funding procedural process to her work. Her extensive development skills were acquired in part as an 11 years of tenure with the City of St. Paul as a Senior Project Manager in the Department of Planning and Economic Development, and 6.5 years as the Director of Housing Development with the Landon Group, a private consulting firm. Building on her public sector capacity, Stephanie's consultant work teamed her with both nonprofit and for-profit clients on complex financial portfolios. Stephanie understands all steps of the development process, including feasibility analysis, financial modeling, site selection and acquisition, pre-development funding, assembling a development team, securing and financing and shepherding developments through closing and construction. She excels at project management as well as bringing project partners and stakeholders together to work efficiently and transparently. Her highly efficient working style and dedication to affordable housing makes Stephanie an integral part of any development team, and we are so glad that she's a member of our team. So I want to introduce Stephanie to you for the presentation, and I will come back in around 7:30 when she is close to wrapping up. So Stephanie, take it away.
Thank you very much. I will share a screen with the presentation. Can you all see that? Okay, great. So good evening. Thank you for joining us in this. I don't know how many times we have done. I think this is our first Town Talk that's been via WebEx. So I appreciate you taking the time to do that. So you may wonder why there's all this attention on affordable housing, even prior to the pandemic, which caused a large swath of our population to lose income. In Edina, the reason for this increased focus is threefold. It is citizen-driven. The results from the quality of life surveys demonstrate that the residents would like there to be more affordable options. The City Council has made a commitment to be responsive to the citizen concern. It is also data-driven. Pre-pandemic, each day, over 40,000 workers would travel into Edina for work. Most of the jobs within the city offer salaries and wages that are less than what is needed to live here, either renting or owning. This commuting contributes to the traffic we are experiencing on the street. Providing more affordable housing is also mandate-driven. As a metropolitan city, we are governed by state statutes. Every 10 years, new affordable housing needs are calculated by the Metropolitan Council and allocated to cities. Edina's share for addressing the affordable housing need is 1,804 new units by by 2040. I have a little video that I'm going to share with you. Some of the data on that was a little bit old. It showed a goal of 1,220, and that was increased recently by the Metropolitan Council. So here's some graphs to show you how over time Edina has become increasingly less affordable. The graph on the left dates back to 1985 to the present. It compares minimum wages to the wage required to buy an average priced home in Edina. Wages have remained relatively stagnant, while housing costs have increased significantly. So the gap in 1985, and this is a minimum wage job, to now. So even then, a two-income earning household could conceivably buy a house in Edina if they were both earning minimum wage. Today, that is not possible. The graph on the right dates back to just the year 2000, and it compares the wages of the most prevalent jobs in Edina with a mortgage payment on the average home. If we extrapolate moving back in time, based on this graph, that in the 80s and 90s, people who worked in Edina could also afford to live in Edina. This is becoming less true today. So what does affordable mean? Housing is affordable if the cost, your housing cost, does not exceed 30% of a household income. And that's true for all incomes, but when we are talking about affordable housing at the city, for rental, it's housing that is affordable to households with incomes at or below 60% of the area median income, adjusted for family size. And for ownership, based on our Come Home to Edina program, it's housing that is less than $425,000. So let's talk about housing generally. So this is the context for what is being developed right now. The city commissioned a Maxfield Research to conduct a market analysis, which was completed right before COVID hit. Based on this, we learned that in 2019, the average price of teardowns was $421,000, a little over that, which were replaced with houses valued on average at almost $1.2 million. The average list price of a previously occupied home is just under $800,000, and for a new home, it was almost $1.5 million. Even multifamily homes were geared towards high-end wage earners. With housing becoming increasingly more expensive and with residents calling for more affordable housing options, what can we do? We looked at three main strategies when discussing affordable housing. There's the production of new affordable units, which is inherently the main focus of our inclusionary zoning policy or housing policy. There's the preservation of affordable housing, both in ownership and rental, and that's housing that's already here. And there's a need to protect the tenants. With preservations, we have seen in our own and in neighboring communities outside investors coming in, buying Class C properties, conducting moderate updates, and then increasing the rents to where the previous tenants can no longer afford to live here. The city's response is somewhat limited by what is allowed in state statute. as Edina is a statutory city, we are more limited than charter cities in how we can address affordable housing. But I'll get more into that later. So who's moving into all this multifamily rental housing? Based on a 2017 survey, and we haven't done this since, so it's something we need to do, 40% of residents who are selling their houses and downsizing, 30% of residents new to the city and getting their feet wet before they decide where they want to move to, and 30% are considered lifestyle renters. So since 2010, 2,600 new units in multifamily housing have been developed or in the process of being developed. Of these, 9% or 241 units are considered affordable. So here's the list, and a lot of these names should be familiar to you. And here's a map of all the projects that have contained affordable units, either down from 3 units that are in the Lorient at 44th and France to 70 units that is being developed by Aon at 4100 West 76th, and that is a 100% affordable building. So some of these examples of recently completed projects are the Avador, and they have 165 units, 18 of which are affordable. Nolan Mains at Market Street, 50th and France. They have 100 units, 10 are affordable. So those are 2 of the new developments that have included affordable units into their market rate product. Then 2 unit properties are pending, and these are 100% affordable. The one that I just mentioned being developed by Aon, we anticipate that this will start construction this autumn. And this is 70 units. It's 100% affordable. And Amundsen Flats, which is in the 70th and Cahill area, this is 62 units. And if you drive by there, activity has already started. So how do we meet demand by type? So there's demand for market rate and there's demand for affordable. And in this graph that was completed by Maxfield Research, rental affordable, there's a demand for 1,500 units, a little over 1,500 units. There's also a demand that we're seeing for senior housing that is 1,600 units over the next 10 years. Now, with regards to the latter, I would like to be clear because I know there's been some confusion. No one in the city is trying to or wanting to push seniors out of their single-family homes. Rather, we want to create options for seniors who would like to sell their homes yet remain within the community. So I mentioned preservation of NOAA properties. NOAA is naturally occurring affordable homes. These are buildings, either single-family ownership, multifamily ownership, or multifamily rental, that are just naturally affordable. There's no government mandate to make them affordable. They just are because they're older, they lack some amenities, and this information is based on CoStar, that there are 61 existing operating rental buildings that have 4 or more units. 27 of these 61 addresses have affordable rents. So that's 1,163 apartment units that are affordable. Now this changes every month. Since they are not mandated by government to be affordable, if the market calls for the rent to increase or they lay new carpeting, they can change the rent on their units. According to Maxfield, 60% of the existing rental, and this is just rental, housing units in Edina are affordable at 80% or below the area median income. 22% of these, so just 22%, are affordable at 60% of the area median income. So there's not a lot in our existing stock that is affordable. And for a household of 4, this 60% is $62,000. For a household of one, they can earn no more than $43,400 to be at 60% area median income. So we have heard, I mean, a lot of people in the community as well as the council says, how do we preserve? I mean, it's cheaper. You hear in the newspaper and in the news, it is cheaper to preserve what is already affordable than building new, because building new can cost well over $200,000 per unit, and it could be a lot less to preserve what we already have. So we developed a program called a 4D program. And what this is, that in exchange for a declaration placed on a property to keep the rents affordable, where the owner will pledge to keep the rents affordable, and this gets recorded, they can have a reduction in the property tax classification, which would save them operating money. It'd save them on their property tax. We also offered a grant to make their buildings more energy efficient, where they could save operating expenses there as well. Well, we've had one taker. The challenge in this is that in Edina, possibly more so than some of our neighbors, the gap between market rents and affordable rents is so wide that owners are hesitant to put a declaration on the property to keep their rents low. We can't force them to do that. They have to choose to do this. We will continue offering these programs and trying to find incentives for them to keep the rents low, but it's really up to them to decide to do this. Another strategy for preservation is an ownership, and we have through the Edina Housing Foundation, we have the Come Home to Edina program, and this is a second mortgage program that reduces the first mortgage obligation. So it makes it so a house becomes more affordable because you put some of the value in the home in the second mortgage that you don't have to pay on a monthly basis. It's deferred until the home is sold or after 30 years. The maximum loan amount is $60,000, so this can reduce the first mortgage by $60,000. The maximum purchase price is $425,000. The interest, if there's an option to do an interest-only payment, would be the same as the first mortgage. So since 2007, we have originated over almost $5.3 million. In fact, it will be, at the end of this month, it will be over $5.3 million in second mortgages. And it can be condominiums, single-family homes. 111 households have benefited from this program. Now, in response to COVID-19, the foundation is enrolling a Stay Home in Edina program. They'll allow homeowners who meet the Come Home to Edina criteria and who have experienced an income reduction due to the pandemic to work with their lender and refinancing their first mortgage to take out a second mortgage. This will reduce their first mortgage obligation, so transfer it to some with a second mortgage. They have to work with their lender to see if they'd be agreeable to do this. We'll also work with homeowners and their lenders who have a balloon forbearance expense. Some people, due to the pandemic, have been awarded a forbearance, which means they don't have to pay on their mortgage during this time, but at some point that money is going to be due. And most banks will just delay when it gets due, so you still pay the same monthly amount. Others are expecting a balloon payment, which is untenable if you're already working hard to make your monthly payment. So we are offering this program. We are also, the City Council has recently annually awards money to the Homes Within Reach program, which is a land trust program. And since between 2007 and 2019, we have awarded just under $1.5 million. And then recently, the HRA awarded an additional $1.3 million in a line of credit to expand this program in Edina to allow more land trusts, which are a way to keep homes affordable for the long run in the city. Finally, we want to protect the residents. In the last couple years, the City Council and HRA have passed a fair housing policy, a non-discrimination of housing choice voucher holders, affirmative fair housing marketing plan, and have introduced rental licensure. We have also, the City Council has also awarded emergency rental assistance that is distributed through VEAP to make sure that renters do not lose their home during this pandemic. It also keeps the landlords whole, that rental income is still coming in so they can pay their utilities and their expenses. Some of these NOAA or the lower rent properties in Edina are small businesses. So we have this emergency rental assistance program. And I think I have really run out of my time. So if not, I'm close. I have Jennifer's email address up there if you want to email questions, or I am available for questions.
So Stephanie, let's keep that up on the screen for a little bit here. So Stephanie's going to stand for questions right now. If you have questions, we want you to use the chat feature within WebEx. If you called in or are watching from home and have a question, please send an email to this address, jbennerat@edinamn.gov. Jennifer and Senior Communications Coordinator Kaylin Eitzness will read the questions for Stephanie to answer. And we will keep answering questions until we run out of questions or until 8 o'clock, whichever comes sooner. So questions for Stephanie.
Scott and Stephanie, this is Jennifer. Thank you for your presentation. We do have a participant who noticed that you used the term lifestyle renter during your presentation, Stephanie, and he's asking what is a lifestyle renter?
Oh, sure. Some people can afford to buy a home, but they don't want to. Their income is enough where that would be something they could do, but they choose to live in rental property because they like the amenities. They like the fact that they don't have to deal with boilers that break in January or roofs that leak during rainstorms. They don't want to deal with that, and they like the flexibility of being able to come and go and not have to worry about maintenance. So those are considered lifestyle renters. It's a choice. It's a lifestyle choice.
Thank you, Stephanie. This is a question that didn't come up in your presentation. You or Scott might be able to answer it, or we might need to get back to the participant. The question is, what are the affordable housing unit occupancy rates at Avidor and Nolan, Maine?
I can answer that. The affordable housing rates at those two places reflect that in the community at large, which right now is zero. Or not occupancy, vacancy rates are zero. Occupancy rates are 100%. So one of the problems with affordable housing, and this is at locally and regionally, is the vacancy rates are extremely low. They tend to be 1% or lower. And a healthy vacancy rate is around 5% to 7%, because that allows for renters to have options. But when the vacancy rates are so low, once you're in a place, you don't want to let go of it. And it also makes people looking and moving in the community or whose financial situations have changed, it makes it a lot more challenging for them to find a place.
Thank you, Stephanie. Our next question is household income verification just W-2? The participant notes that will not verify any 1099 or cash income. So what happens when household income goes over the allowed amount for affordable housing?
First of all, it's not just that. Affordable housing is the most highly regulated of all types of housing. They look at bank statements, they look at investment statements, they need employer verification. They do look at the tax statements, so they look at a variety of documents. Now, just because someone qualified initially to live in affordable housing, the objective is to not keep them income suppressed. So their incomes can increase to 140% of the area median income before they either need to pay market rate rents or they need to move into an affordable unit, depending on how the building structures it.
Thanks, Stephanie. We have a question from Andy. He asks, how will the development of the Southwest Light Rail affect the need for such housing in Edina?
That's challenging. It probably was going to be bring a little bit more attention to the Northwest area. The Southwest Light Rail does not go through the city. Clearly, if it went through the city, there is a lot of attention and desire to build affordable housing near station area stops because it allows for that easy access to public transportation. We don't have that close of access in the city to any of the stations, so I don't know what, if any, effect it's going to have.
Our next question is from Hope. Why did the Metro Council increase the target of need for affordable housing in Edina?
Well, I do want to clarify some of the terminology, target and need. So they look at the overall region and how and jobs that are available and where there's housing and where there's transportation, and they put it in this big formula, and then they come up with a number of what they think the population's going to be, and based on different variables, they are able to anticipate how much of that population is going to need affordable housing. And then they distribute it amongst the cities in the 7-county area based on a different formula. So our number was 212 at the last comprehensive plan. Due to growth in the region and the job situation in the region, when they started working on the comprehensive plan, it increased to 848 units. And then a year later, they readjusted every year. A year later, it went up to the 1220, and another year passed before the Met Council reviewed our comp plan. And so because of generalized population growth, because of density, because of development, because of a variety of variables, they did another annual adjustment. And it happened to be that it was during the time that they were reviewing our comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Stephanie. We have a number of questions about a project at Abercrombie and Dugan. Do you know about that project? And can you talk about the project, where it's at, and that sort of thing?
Certainly. Are there specific questions? Because I know there's some rumors going around that I would like to put to rest.
Yeah, there are a number of questions. I'll rattle a few of them off. Why was the formal notice about the project given to such a small number of houses in the neighborhood? What's the time frame to respond and address issues related to this project? And just general questions about process and transparency.
Okay, some of those process questions I'm a little shaky on because I'm not a planner. But when they give notices for public hearings in the neighborhood, it is based on distance from the site that is in question. And so it was 500 feet. And that is a standard public notice letter that goes out for when there's a public hearing. So that explains the distance. This was talked about on June 2nd at a work session with City Council. Then it was talked about again at the regular City Council meeting on June 16th when there was a call for a public hearing. There aren't any precise development plans at this time because you cannot get a developer to put in the time and effort to create a precise development plan if the city council will not convey the land. There needs to be some assurances, there needs to be some element of site control before a plan can be developed and discussed. So when other developers have brought before a community a plan to get feedback on, it's because they have already gained site control. Right now, that is an unknown. However, before any project, before there are any shovels in the ground, before any of that happens, there will be community outreach. We just need to see if the city council the foundation would like to see if the city council is willing to convey that site for the creation of affordable housing. There was another rumor that it was going to be a multifamily Section 8 property. That has not been discussed. There is no multifamily. It's not zoned for multifamily. It cannot be multifamily. That will not be happening. Section 8, we're looking at 120% of area median income. That is far above what a household, to qualify for Section 8, you'd need far less than that. So that is not on the table either.
Thanks, Stephanie. Circling back to the vacancy rate of the affordable units, is there a waiting list in Edina that people can use?
The city does not own or manage any of the affordable units in Edina. Each of them is privately owned and managed, and each maintains their own waiting list. And yeah, there are waiting lists. So what I recommend to folks that call about this is to get on the list. Some waiting lists are closed. They get so long that they think that it'll be years out before anyone gets off the waiting list, so they close it. Others are still active, but it can take a while to be bumped from the waiting list into a unit. But yes, there are.
Thank you, Stephanie. James asks, what are some other options being used by some of our neighboring cities, and which cities do you think are doing a better job of managing this issue of affordable housing, and why?
I can say that I'm on calls with my colleagues and counterparts in our neighboring cities on a regular basis, and this is a struggle for everyone. One thing that our neighboring communities that we're doing, and the city is now doing it, is acquiring land that becomes available on the open market with the idea, so competing with the private market and acquiring land to fulfill a policy objective. So other cities would, if the property became available, they would buy it and hold it for a developer and seek a developer for its development. That's relatively new in Edina. We did this with the 4040 West 70th, and it's a policy shift. It's a paradigm shift that the council agreed to do. So that's one thing that others are doing. Other than that, we are a statutory Plan B city. So some other of our neighbors have some tenant protection policies and other policies to really protect tenants. We are a little bit more hamstrung by state statute on what we can do. We can only do what's explicitly stated in statute, where charter cities have more leeway to put in policies and ordinances.
Niles points out that you presented information regarding some construction of new affordable housing, and he asks that you give more information about the locations of that new construction.
There are two that are going. One is currently has activity, and that's at 7070 5 Amundsen Avenue. So that's in the 70th and Cahill commercial area, right south of 70th. So pretty much on the corner of 70th and Amundsen. So there are some trucks there. Demolition should be commencing soon. If it hasn't already, I have to drive by there. The other one is at 4100 West 76th Street. That right now is just a vacant building. We anticipate construction is going to start mid-autumn.
Lori asks if you know which of our neighboring cities have met the affordable housing unit goals assigned to them by the Metropolitan Council.
No one.
You're too fast for me, Stephanie.
Yeah, I mean, that's an easy one. No one can meet it, in part because of there's such a gap between when you have affordable rents, you can only leverage so much debt financing from a bank. You can only borrow so much money from a bank for the construction of affordable housing because the rents are lower and the cost of construction is high. So there's this gap between what you can borrow and what you need. And who fills that gap? It's government or foundations or charities. And there's finite government funding available to fill that gap, and it is shrinking every year on the federal level.
Thank you for that more detailed explanation. I've noticed that we're still on the final slide of your presentation so that we can see your smiling face again. Would you mind taking that down for the rest of our questions?
No,
our next,
if I can.
Thank you. Our next one is from James. He says, you mentioned the difference between market and affordable rents. How do the 100% affordable buildings make this work?
For one reason is what I was explaining about there needing to be gap. So they can only borrow, and their debt is based on what their operating costs are going to be. So when you do a calculation, you figure out what your rent income is going to be, and you factor in a vacancy, and then what your operating costs are, your utilities, your management, your reserves for upkeep, maintenance, property management staff. You factor in all those, and then there's some left over. And you borrow based on what's left over. So you already calculate that in before you even start construction. And you have to time it out for 15 years. It's part of the application process for this government financing. So you can't go negative. So if you go negative, then you have to reduce how much you're going to borrow and increase how much you need in gap over a 15-year time spread. And they build in expense escalators, and they build in income escalators, and the expenses increase at a faster rate than income. Spread that out over 15 years. You still have to have a positive cash flow. Your debt's based on that. This is really technical, and I apologize for that. But you do that before you start construction, and that's how you can be assured that you'll be able to maintain operating for at least those 15 years. It's hard to project out past 15 years.
Thank you, Stephanie. This next question might be more for Scott than you, Stephanie. How is the city prioritizing affordable housing over the need for a new water treatment plant and 2 new fire stations?
I would say they are not. I'd say one isn't prioritized over the other because the income streams or the funding sources that would pay for these respective projects aren't the same, and they're not competing for each other. So, for instance, a water treatment plant is going to be built from revenues from the sale of water. We can't build affordable housing with water sales revenue. A fire station will be built with general fund revenues. We can't build a fire station with water sales revenues. We can't Our affordable housing projects are funded outside of our general fund and outside of our water sales revenues. So there really are three distinct funding sources, and so they aren't stacked up against one another in terms of priorities.
Thank you, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Back to you, Stephanie. One of our participants notes that Metro Transit plans to reduce bus service in the Twin Cities due to COVID-19. How will this affect people getting from affordable housing to jobs and shopping?
That's a problem. I hope that everyone, we are in a new world now, responding to COVID-19 and dealing with the fallout for this. So actually, I had not heard that. So one could hope, without being able to say definitively, that if jobs come back, and then ridership would come back, and then they wouldn't need to do that cut. Metro Transit tends to place bus service where there are riders, and so by building, and that's one of the arguments for density, that if you have apartment buildings that are near other population centers, then it's more likely that that will be served by buses versus something that is a standalone away from any sort of population center. So, but I think we're all going to be responding to the after effects of COVID.
Stephanie, there are a couple questions. Maybe you know the answer or maybe not, but the empty lot that was proposed, or the proposed development is was that ever designated as a park before? No. Okay.
No. It used to be a road that hit Normandale, and as you can see across the street, there's a boulevard. And so it was a continuation of that, and then they put Normandale in there in the highway, and that's how I understand it, and then that was just cut off. And they tore up the concrete and grassed it over, and it's been sitting there like that.
Okay. And then somebody else asked, why isn't there a proposed or development plan that the neighborhood could be shown? They're concerned about the unknowns.
Understandably. Because we don't even know yet. The city council has to decide whether or not they're even allow it to be developed into a single-family lot. So we can't engage a developer to craft a plan with the big unknown on whether or not a lot is even going to be available. I mean, that's a lot of expense and a lot of risk anyway for a developer. So what we anticipate happening with that site is if next Tuesday the City Council says yes, proceed Housing Foundation, they would enter into a purchase agreement. They wouldn't convey it right then and there. They would enter into a purchase agreement saying if certain criteria are met, then we will sell this lot. Then the foundation, understanding that the City Council is, okay with the idea of that site being developed, still has approvals later on, can go and seek a developer who can then look at the site and craft up a plan that fits the area. Meet with the community, get feedback from the community, and then, restructure the plan based on community input. And then the City Council ultimately has control over regulatory approvals and the final sale of the parcel. But at this stage, when right now it's a vacant lot, that there hasn't been any real full discussion on putting a house there, we can't get a developer to come up with a plan that we can share with the community. So we have to go through these processes in order to get there.
Thanks for talking about that project again, Stephanie. Jeffrey asks, is consideration being given to altering the zoning restrictions in Edina? He points out, he says, frankly, as evidenced by the failure of uptake of the 4D program, natural affordable housing will not occur to a significant degree when there is so little land available for multifamily housing.
That is a bigger question than my pay grade. And
I
I'd
would,
say it's wrought with policy and politics.
yeah, I would say it's hard. I don't know what's in the mind of the person posing the question, but if the question is asking, are we going to consider something in Edina like what Minneapolis is done or wants to do in terms of eliminating single-family zoning? I don't think that's I don't think that's in the cards. At least we've never had any discussions about that at the policy level.
Our next question comes from David. He asked, is there any discussion about incentives to bringing in living wage jobs to Edina so people in affordable housing can work in the community?
That is also a very large question about increasing minimum wage. It's an economic development. It's based on market. It's based on, I mean, there has been a huge divide. Minimum wage, for instance, has been kept flat for, essentially flat for about 40 years. And the cost of housing clearly has increased. That is a large political question. And yes, I mean, our economic development and staff, and Scott can add to this, would clearly want higher living wage jobs in the city. We're dealing it with on the other side until the national system changes and taxing system and everything, if it changes. Right now, we're trying to address the fact that there are all these people that are working in the city and they can't afford to live here. So we're trying to give options. There's no guarantee that if you're a nursing aide at the hospital that you'll want to live in Edina if that were there. I mean, we're not going to force them to move into Edina, but at least right now we're trying to provide them with the option to do so.
I would say from a policy discussion standpoint, we have had lots of discussions about the value of economic development in Edina and how that can drive a successful local economy. But as Stephanie just mentioned, one of the complexities of a economic development program that's aimed at living wage jobs or above living wage jobs in a suburban environment is exactly that. You could have a really robust program in Edina, and it might lead to nobody actually living here. Or it could be a program somewhere in some other community, and it would create a demand for living in Edina. It's different to do those kinds of programs in a suburban environment than it is, say, in Mankato or Rochester or Duluth or other kind of standalone communities. So we have a lot of discussion about it. We always assist when we have the opportunity, if we have an opportunity to bring new jobs into the community, and we did that last year with the Nerdery. The Nerdery is moving from a place in Bloomington, where they developed and grew their business. They're now moving into 7700 France. Bill Neuendorf, our economic development manager, was a key asset for the community in courting those folks and getting them connected to the building owners and making sure that they had all the information they needed to make their decision to move to Edina.
Scott or Stephanie, is there any discussion of affordable housing in the Pentagon Park or the old public works site?
Sure.
We've had multiple discussions about affordable housing in both of those locations. None of them have taken root to date. And not because Stephanie hasn't tried very hard to make them take root. They just haven't in both locations because of market considerations and just in one location, the Pentagon Park, Pentagon Village area. On the city's old former public works maintenance facility, it hasn't taken root just because we haven't been able to make up our collective mind about what we want in that 3.3 acres. Stephanie, I don't know if you want to.
No, I mean, I have been thorn in Scott's side regarding that site because, yes, I want it. And I would love to put affordable housing there, but the city has priorities that extend beyond my interests and desires, and so it's getting agreement on what to do.
What about in the Pentagon Park area?
We were working with a developer for quite some time on that area, and that development plan fell through. Couldn't come to an agreement. And it's privately held. The building's there. Not where the new development is, on the north side of the road. We were looking at that. In the south side, the plans didn't, as they were developed, didn't include affordable housing.
Thank you.
But if a building becomes available, yes, for sure, we'll discuss it and figure out how to make it work.
Thank you, Stephanie. Stephen asks if you can explain the relationship of the Edina Housing Foundation and the city, and also if you could give the mission of the Edina Housing Foundation, or the East Edina Housing Foundation.
All right, it would take me a few minutes to look up the mission. I do not have that memorized. Something to do, put on my to-do list. The relationship is the Edina Housing Foundation is an independent 501c3 nonprofit organization that is comprised of volunteers who, there's 5 board members that are all volunteers. I am a staff liaison to them. I am a city employee, but I help do some of the administrative work for the foundation. The foundation board members are appointed, 2 are appointed by, I might have this mixed up, the City Council, and 3 are appointed by the Housing and Redevelopment Authority. We put on through our city website when a position becomes available. If one of the board members steps down or moves and a position becomes available, then we advertise it as a city. Applications come in. They are vetted and reviewed by the other board members. Their mission is to advance affordable housing in the city, but the exact wording I would have to get for you.
The only thing I would add to what Stephanie said is they have an interesting backstory in that they were formed in the late 80s, early 90s as part of the overall development of the Edinburgh Park and Centennial Lakes area. You know, that was a massive redevelopment. There was a lot of tax increment funding in that redevelopment, and one of the spin-offs of that redevelopment was the creation of the East Edina Housing Foundation at the time, now called the Edina Housing Foundation.
Someone just asked a follow-up. Is the Edina Housing Foundation located at City Hall?
No, it is not. They do, I mean, we as the administrator, I get their mail, but there is no formal office.
Thank you. Chris asks, as we look at locations for future affordable housing, is there a priority on locating this housing within the Edina Public School District?
I don't have that priority. We ultimately we would like to have affordable housing developments in all 4 quadrants of the city. I do have a map that I did not share with you on the presentation because the dots get so small. If you look at our affordable housing combined with all the different programs, it is pretty widely spread out and distributed. Clearly, as development, as the 93% of the city is zoned single family and 7% is zoned multifamily, and the most of the zoning for multifamily is in the Southdale area. It's going to split between school districts. For single family, it's spread out, and I don't look at school districts necessarily.
I think we have time for just one more question. And this one is there any program to give preference to veterans for affordable housing?
Not at this time. We have a lot of priorities. Two of them were the Amundsen and 4100 that I mentioned. Our family housing, the 4040 West 70th, is senior. Veterans, I have worked in my past life on veterans housing. They tend to do really well on the light rail with easy access to the VA. But if there ends up being a lot of interest and a call for that, of course, we'll look at it.
Well, that's about all we have for tonight. It's around 8 o'clock, and we try to wrap these town talks up at 8 o'clock. So I want to thank Kaylin and Jennifer and Scott Denfeld, who you haven't heard from or seen tonight, for doing the logistical work and the technical work to put this on. I want to thank Stephanie for her participation and leadership through this presentation tonight. And most importantly, I want to thank our residents who tuned in tonight and contributed really a lot of great questions. We appreciate that, and we appreciate the opportunity to communicate with you tonight on this very important topic. As a reminder, you can continue to ask questions and to make comments about affordable housing online tonight at bettertogetheredina.org for the next week. The online conversation closes Wednesday, July 22nd. If you'd like to, you can join us for our next town talk. It'll be September 16th, and we'll be talking about traffic and transportation. We'll make an announcement about that event, whether it's virtual or in person. We're not sure at this point, in the time leading up to that event. So on behalf of all the staff that are here tonight, I want to thank you for joining us, and have a good night. Thank you.